Mr. Enill, Conrad Enill, a very good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Oh, good morning to you, son. I'm very well. Thanks for asking.
It's always good to hear you. We are indeed fortunate here in Trinidad and Tobago, as the rest of the world, because if you take a look at Asia, they're having a very tough time with Mexico had an earthquake, over 90 people killed. In parts of Asia, people are undergoing some serious flood conditions, over 400,000 dislocated. In the United States, Irma is hitting this morning. So sometimes you say, if it is bad, just look around and you realize it is not that bad.
Well, but besides that, I mean, we had the opportunity to experience some time ago what this condition can do, and I think that all of us recognize that it is a difficult time. Lots of stuff that we are possibly unprepared for, we need to do, and I think that when you look at what these events can in fact do, because I think we are at the beginning of it.
Yes.
I think our conversation needs to shift slightly.
Indeed, you're quite right. Conrad Enill is my guest. Let us talk about the PNM. 2 years ago, September 5, I believe it was, became the body elected by the populace to lead the country. They came in, of course, like all oppositions do, because you look from the outside and you say, I will do this, I will do that, I will do the other. And sometimes it's easy to talk about the pot because you smell it from the outside. However, when you get in there and you handed the ingredients and you see what you have to put in the pot, you say, well, my God, where is the sieve? Where is the time? Where is all the different elements that's supposed to be there, particularly in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. Primarily here we're talking about the economy. Where is the money after 2 years? How do you rate the performance of the PNM, sir?
Well, I've already gone on record as saying that I think that they've done well, and some commentators have basically disagreed with me, and that's okay. But to me, you have to look at a couple of things. First of all, you have to look at the external environment. What is going on outside there?
Yes.
You know, even as you look at organizations now have to deal with new requirements. Those in the business will understand IFRS 9, which is basically a different way of looking at some of these things that you've taken for granted in the past. You looked at technology, you've looked at cybersecurity. You've looked at a number of different things, and the world has definitely changed. So that you have to manage in the context of a changing world environment. You have to manage in the context of things that are no longer what they were. And you have to ask the question, are the institutions that you created some time ago still able to deliver? I mean, when I was in government, we knew that government was basically created for administration purposes and policy purposes. However, government was basically distributing $40 billion worth of dollars and cents into active projects, and that required a different kind of infrastructure. So the government at the time selected the special purpose vehicles with very, very specific responsibility. That experiment, some say, didn't work well because those who inherited it didn't understand the context within which it was done, and they dealt with it in a particular way. But that is all part of the process. If you ask the question about the government, I would say that to the credit of the government, we've not seen what we've seen in other jurisdictions where you've had massive layout of people. I think the government has basically tried to basically deal with the problems by trying not to, in a sense, go with the very first option that certainly some would go with. I mean, in the other side of the country, once your revenues drop, the first thing you do is you reduce workforce.
That's right.
That's not the case in the government. I mean, the government continues. Yes, sometimes they can't make the payments on time. Sometimes they make it late, but they continue to find ways to keep people employed and to keep people basically maintaining their jobs. And I think that what that suggests is that the minute the revenue stream gets better, there will be less pressure. But at the same time, you would have kept people in employment, and therefore you'd have kept families, in a degree of quality living. And I think that's the purpose of the government. So on that basis, alone, I have concluded that the government have done well. Now, are there problems? Of course there are problems. Are there issues? Of course there are issues. Are there challenges? Yes, there are. But those challenges and those issues do not take away from the fact that the government chose in all the things that it could have done to try to ensure that people maintained their jobs so that they can feed their families and that they could make an adjustment over time. And that is what I am concerned about, because to me, that is what is important in a society that is going through transformation.
The voice you're hearing is that of Conrad Enill, the former minister in the Ministry of Finance. He is our guest this morning, and you made two observations along the way there that are most poignant. One being slow payment and sometimes slightly late payments. Folks folks operate as though that is not supposed to happen. The Prime Minister did say, "I'm going to do everything I can to ensure the IMF does not dictate for us." And in trying to do this juggling act, you are going to find instances where you do not meet all your payment on time. However, there are many who operate as though if you're late for 1 day, 2 days, or just 1 week, the sky is falling and you should be removed.
Well, I think that if you have the resources available to you, and that is what is happening, then that's a case of incompetence. And I will agree if those were the conditions, but those are not the conditions. Mm-hmm. The conditions are very different. In 2016, the energy sector contributed significantly to the revenues of the government. I think when I looked at it, it was about $16 billion. In 2014, $16 billion. By 2016, it was $844 million. That is a dramatic reduction in revenues.
Yes.
And no institution, no business institution can withstand that. At that level, you would simply cease to do business.
You belong in a class of people that I respect for their input, but you're not the only member in that class. Yet I am seeing so many economists and those who I think should have a better idea making a judgment after 2 years that the ship of state is a boat that can be turned around immediately, and even in spite of reduced revenue, business should go on as usual, including the process of entitlement and expectation. You said you would be there. You promised this. You promised that. You promised that. In spite of what prevailed, you promised. Where is it? Is it something I'm missing?
No, I think that we have we have a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where it is very topical not to seem to align yourself with something that is good, no matter where it comes from. That's simply one of the things that we have to correct going forward, because you see, I think that people seem to forget that Trinidad and Tobago belongs to all of us, and we have different roles at different times. But whenever we talk about problems in the society or whenever we talk about challenges, the fact is that we are talking about people's lives, and therefore people need to understand what it is they have to do in order to make their own personal adjustments so that they can have a better quality of life. And therefore, yes, I have heard, some of my friends who are basically very lettered say things like, the government has done absolutely nothing in the country. And I'm saying, but, where do you live? Take, for example, the issue of gate. Let me just make the point. The issue of gate. I have heard people say, well, we did it so wrong. Folks, at this point in time, the future of Trinidad and Tobago can be changed if we simply took the 64% of individuals in the society who have tertiary education and turn that into a knowledge-based intervention where using technology we can make available, as we are doing now, online and blended learning, where some of us who teach globally basically spend time with students all over the world, teaching them subjects and teaching volumes of people in front of a computer. They don't have to go anywhere. They simply have to go into a room, go on a computer, go on a screen, and talk to us about what the issues are. Last year, a particular institution had a leadership conference, and we spent an hour talking to somebody in Switzerland who was doing their degree and who was actually a PhD in innovation. And we were able to understand that Trinidad and Tobago had a significant amount of room insofar as its potential for export is concerned, because we have not even started to use the additional space that we have for productive activity. So, if we were to look at Trinidad and Tobago from another sense, that is to say, all these things we have that are good, and we try to expand those, we have no difficulty.
Conrad Enill is my guest this morning. Aging oil infrastructure, low production, prices that we have no control over. All these things have been happening for some time. We have seen it coming. And like I said, I wonder if folks are too locked into scoring political points generally than they are with bringing to those of us who are not in that cadre, that group of the intelligentsia economically. I wonder if it is all about scoring political points as against explaining to the populace the reality of what is, thus tempering expectations.
But let me make another point to you. We keep talking about this oil and gas industry, and we keep talking about it as if we understand it. The facts were that when Trinidad and Tobago was simply an oil economy, we were subject to price fluctuation. That is to say, price goes up, we into boom, price comes down, we into bust. The characteristics of a gas economy are slightly different. The characteristics of a gas economy are basically high volume, low price. So when, for example, you get a Ryder Scott report that says that the country is involved in current production activity and therefore will have, for the next 6 to 8 years, revenues, which is all it means. It means that as a government, as a country, you could plan for 6 years of revenue at a particular rate because the characteristics of gas operate that way. So you could do long-term development planning from that perspective. That is significantly different from the oil economy that we knew before, and therefore it is not the same.
Gotcha.
We have progressed over the continuum, and therefore we are in a different place, and the characteristics are different, and therefore our responses are different.
I got you.
So we're not in a bad space,
We just have to be tough and understand that in the meantime you have to adjust all your priorities. I oftentimes go to something Vladimir Putin said about Russia when he said, "I am happy that the whole situation." I know we just spoke about gas, and that is more sturdy in the planning. But when oil prices went down, he said it brings our people into looking at other areas of development, self-sustainability, and that not looking at the state to hand out all the time. You think that what has happened here, even though we have a part solution with the gas situation, as you just articulated, but do you think this brought about a reality to the populace? And if not, what does it take for folks to recognize you cannot keep spending and expecting things to be handed to you as against adjusting to the realities of the world?
Well, I think first of all, we have to understand the philosophy by which we select our governance team. The philosophy is, do you give people what they want, or do you do what is right for the country? And those are two different conversations. And I'm afraid that usually what happens is that the population says to its governance team, this is what I want, and if you don't give it to me, I will get rid of you. And therefore the conversation has to change. The conversation has to be, what is in the best interest for us as a society going forward? Where the rest of the world is moving forward and the rest of the world is developing. And if we are not careful, we would have a lot of money, but we will have nothing else. And we see that happening. Money is not all. Money is a function of productivity. It's a function of price. It's a function of all of that. But money by itself is needed to ensure that you have a better quality of life, a better infrastructure, a better way of doing stuff. And that, to me, is what we need to be focusing on.
the former energy minister and minister in the Ministry of Finance, Conrad Enill, on a brief chat with us this morning. I do want to go into the area because we know that very soon we will be hearing from the Minister of Finance. This budget time is just around the corner. If revenues do not rise, and notwithstanding the point you made about the gas, in order to control unemployment and the attendant social dislocation, what measures do you anticipate from the Minister of Finance in his upcoming budget?
Well, I think he's going to have to get into priority issues because quite frankly, first of all, I do not accept that there will not be revenues, because revenues from the energy companies, for example, is simply a function of profits and taxes, and they are not going to continue to operate in a loss position at all. So that they're going to right-size their businesses, and the right-sizing of the businesses will provide them with more revenue, from which the government will get more taxes. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not the government can continue to sustain expenditure in the face of external factors that may, in fact, be increasing the cost of living. And to me, that's the big challenge, because it doesn't really matter who runs the country. If tomorrow morning a new government is put into place and the Minister of Finance walks into his job in the towers, he's going to have to find $12 billion worth of salaries, and he's going to have to find $9 billion worth of debt. And he's going to have to find, he is going to inherit a cost structure that is currently there.
Anybody can change the narrative, but you can't change the facts.
You can't change the facts. The facts are that you have an expenditure profile that you have built up over the years, and it is difficult to change the expenditure profile without hurting people. And therefore, you have to decide if you are going to go in. And you see, I think that the narrative needs to be understood. If you have a shortfall in revenue, you can either do it in one or two ways. You can either borrow, and therefore you are putting the burden of adjustment on the children of the society. That is to say, you're putting it on future generations, and is that fair? Or you can ask the current generation to look at their priorities and do what is important and make the adjustments now. Those are the two priorities. Those are the two issues you have to deal with. And many of us have decided that what we will do is we will let the children deal with the sins of their parents. That makes no sense, but that is what the reality is by increasing the debt. When you borrow, somebody has to pay.
Not only that, when you borrow, your borrowing becomes more and more expensive.
Well, a couple of things happen as a result of borrowings. One is that your borrowings become more expensive. Two, the country is put at risk because you have credit rating issues. Three, it means the whole business community starts to have to pay more. And basically, all of those costs end up with the ordinary individual on fixed income. And the impact of that decision is really where you are making people poorer as a result of changing the infrastructure. So you have to understand that when you do those things, there are unintended consequences that you may not have understood, but which will happen anyhow because you have started a particular course of action that is difficult to come away from.
Conrad Enill, always appreciative of your clarity. I just have one concluding question to ask you. Much is said about credit rating. Usually you hear about credit rating and folks start saying, some folks start saying the sky is falling, but even the United States get herself downgraded at times. Explain to us, how concerned should we be about fluctuation in credit ratings?
We should be, because it determines what interest rate you can borrow money at. So if you have a good credit rating, what it basically says is that the people that you are borrowing from, other people's money, have a view that you will repay it. If they think that you will not be able to repay it, then what they do is they build into the interest rate a risk that is associated with the inability to pay it, so that they try to get the money back in small amounts. So credit rating is something that we should pay attention to.
As we do individually, but is there a situation where you try to control it as best as you can, but you don't overreact to the small movements, because that is part of the cost of doing business?
Well, it is part of the cost of business, and it is also reflective, if you will, of what the conditions are, the external environment. So, for example, if you looked at any rating from any of the agencies, you would see where they would have attached a negative rating to Trinidad and Tobago because they believe that the economic situation is going to get worse before it gets better. And as a result of that, they think that there is going to be more unemployment, and they think that there's going to be more pressures in the society, and therefore they think that that is negative. And therefore they would say, okay, on the basis of that, if I am lending you money in those conditions, it is not what it was before. So to the extent that an investor needs to know, then the rating will reflect whether you can get the best rates around, or you're going to get rates that is a little bit more expensive, and then you have to decide whether your project is going to be able to deal with that or not. So it's really about managing risk, and the rating reflects the risk that those who do this see in the society as a result of your ability to repay, because they think that if the conditions are getting worse, you have less people involved in productive activity, you have less productive activity. It means that I may not get the money when I want it, because you may have difficulty in scheduling and those kind of things. Well, therefore, the risk is higher.
Conrad,
So I look at you and I look at somebody else, and I might give somebody else who has a lower level risk.
former minister in the Ministry of Finance, former energy minister, head of a credit union here in Trinidad and Tobago, Conrad Enill. You are in the business of this. I like the ray of optimism. You give the government a conditional 8, because you understand the circumstances under which they came into power and they are managing. I thank you so much for taking the time to be with me this morning, sir.
Thank you, my friend. And as per usual, we are not in a bad place. We just need to do some things differently.
I needed my ray of optimism. You provided it. Thank you so very much. Have a wonderful day, sir.
Thank you.